I am going to bring in Kate, who is one of our filmmakers, and we're going to bring in Tom, who is the other one of our filmmakers, and we're going to bring in Andy, who is both one of the subjects of the documentary and the safety officer, to make sure the documentary, everybody came home alive.
Great. Thanks so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us and for taking an interest in the project. We really appreciate it. And hi, good evening, everyone. My name's Tom, and I form one half of Studio BW with Kate White.
Hello, everybody.
Um, Something that's blindingly obvious to us, but we've recently realized isn't obvious to everyone else, is the fact that we're brother and sister. So that's who we are. My background is in music. I had a career playing in bands for quite a long time. And then whilst I was studying, I became interested in filmmaking and in particularly in telling stories about climate. And Kate's background is in journalism. Kate started her career in Chamonix when she first got into writing and went on to be the editor of Climber magazine in the UK, and recently has begun to specialize in audio journalism. And this is the first film that we've made together. And before we do a screening and show it to all of you, I'll just tell you a little bit about how the project got started and how it came to be. And we're thanks, Andy. Thanks so much for joining us this evening because really the way in which the project got started was when I went on a ski touring trip with Andy, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, and found I'll just have to spare your embarrassment a little bit here, Andy, but found Andy to be a really interesting character, and we had some very interesting conversations about the mountains and about climate. And so I then arranged to go to visit Andy in Chamonix and to make an audio story with him. And I'm just going to put a link to that in the chat. If anyone wants to hear that, that's sort of part of the background of this project. You can listen to that later in your own time. And we went up to Mont Blanc and we went and hiked on the glacier. And we talked about Andy's feelings about the environment and how it's changed over the time that he's known it. And it was really interesting. It was also the first time that I'd been to Montanvert since Kate and I, with our parents, who may be in the webinar as well, Mike and Jenny. Um, we we skied the Vallée Blanche in probably in around about 1993, Kathy, probably about around about the same time as you first saw it. So I was a kid. I don't know, 8 or 10, or yeah, I'd have been 10. And then I didn't, and then I'd never been back. I'd never been back to Montanvert, to that. I'd been back to Chamonix, but I hadn't been there for, 30 years. And so it was a really disorienting and shocking moment to go and see that site and to compare it to those quite vague, but at the same time, incredibly exciting and precious childhood memories of being there. Nevertheless, I still thought that it was a fascinating site. Visually, historically, economically, there was so much about it that interested me. And um, and it's a site that means something to everyone, whether you're a skier or a guide or a glaciologist, or you've gone there to see the view, or you've seen it on a TV show. It speaks to you, and it's a site that makes people ask questions. So Kate and I started talking about it, and we had a really strong feeling that we wanted to do the kind of storytelling we'd done in the audio piece with Andy, but that we wanted to expand the project and try to make it something that could include more voices. And we ended up calling the project the Mer de Glace Listening Project. And we settled on that title quite early on because it gave us quite a clear guide as to how we were approaching trying to tell this story. We knew that a lot of people had done more factual, science-based projects about educating people about the types of climate effects that are happening on the Mer de Glace or in Chamonix and in that area. And I suppose we wanted to try to complement those by telling the story from a different perspective, or perhaps bringing a different dimension to that conversation. And that was about paying really close attention to the voices of the people whose lives are entwined with this site on a daily basis, finding out what it means to them, finding out how they are responding to the transformation of the environment, and finding a way for those voices to exist alongside each other in dialogue, to find out if there are tensions between them, if there is agreement between them. So that was the project that ended up taking a couple more years, and became the film that we're going to screen for you now. It was shown at Kendal Mountain Festival in November, and we're still at the stage of submitting it to festivals, which means for now it's not available to watch anywhere online. So it's really exciting to have the chance to show everybody who's here tonight. Oh, and another thing just to share before I start the screening was that after the ski touring trip I went on with Andy a few years ago, one of the first things I did when I got home was to join the Eagles. So great to meet all of you fellow members for the first time. All right, I'm gonna share the film now. I hope everybody enjoys.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Um, we have some behind the scenes images, which Tom's just going to share while we just give you a bit of information about the more practical elements of making the film. And then we're going to open it up to a bit of a Q&A if anyone had anything they wanted to talk to us about or ask us. Just quickly before we get started, as part of our fundraising efforts in order to make this film exist, we did a GoFundMe page fundraising campaign. And I know that some of you from the club will have contributed to that. So genuine, heartfelt thanks to anyone who did. It was really greatly appreciated. And we really couldn't have made the project without those generous contributions. So thank you from Tom and myself for that. So the making of the film was very much a kind of project of two halves, in that we wanted to shoot the glacier, and then we also wanted to spend time with the individuals that we featured. So I'm going to talk about our approach to shooting the glacier first. We wanted to show it from the bottom, the middle, and the top. And this is where Andy was really helpful and essential to enabling this to happen. So we very much relied on Andy's expert local knowledge about the best locations and the best places to access in order to get those places, in order to get access to the top and the middle and the bottom. So for the bottom, we accessed it from the Mont Blanc lift. The train took the train up, the lift down, hiked down onto the glacier. To get to those middle sections, we then, with Andy, hiked up through the crevasses to position in the middle of the section. And feel free to dive in, Andy, if you wanted to give any more specific detail about the locations we went to. And then to access the top, we actually went through the tunnel through to the Italian side of the Mont Blanc Massif and took the enormous and very impressive lift structure right up to Heilbronner at the top, to access that top. And then going over there, sorry, I'm reaching right up at the screen there, we were able to get this incredible vista looking down, right down, following the Mer de Glace as it wends its way down towards the Montanvert end of it. The way we approached how we were going to shoot the glacier, we were really keen to get a lot of very close-up shots of details, some of these very almost otherworldly, alien-like details of the shapes that the ice, the moraine, and the rocks form. And before zooming out and getting these big, wider shots, we did do some static shots with a static camera, but we also did a lot of drone shots in order to get these angles and different perspectives of the glacier. And to get the drone shots, we worked with a local cameraman called Clement, who's based in Chamonix and has got a lot of knowledge and experience of flying drones in that area. Because as you can imagine, anyone who's been on the Mer de Glace, flying a drone on the Mer de Glace, which is basically like a highway for helicopters going up and down at all times of day, is quite a specific thing to do. And fortunately, Clement had a very close relationship with the PGHM and the organizations who are responsible for these helicopters. So at the moment of shooting, he would put a call in to the organization, let them know, well, ask permission. Is it okay for us to fly a drone over the next hour? Assuming that there wasn't anything critical that wasn't able to enable us to do that. They gave us permission. All helicopter pilots at that time would know that there was going to be a drone in the Mer de Glace, in the airspace over the Mer de Glace during that time. The helicopters would either fly at a much higher elevation, because sometimes they go in really close up to the glacier, a much higher elevation to avoid any potential crash with the drone, or they would hold off for an hour. Likewise, if there was an emergency and there was going to be a helicopter there, drone or no drone, they would be putting a call into us, which fortunately didn't happen. As soon as we were finished shooting, Clement would put another call in to say, right, we're done, the airspace is clear, the helicopters have got the free run of it. So that was a really essential part of that experience of shooting with a drone, of flying a drone over the Mer de Glace at all heights, at all parts of it. We did have to work quite closely with the Compagnie de Mont Blanc, who managed the uplift in this area of Chamonix, in order to get access to different areas of the glacier, and also access to some of their personnel who were able to tell us a bit about some of their plans for the infrastructure going on around there. And Benjamin Claret, who was the manager of the ice cave at Montanvert, who we featured in our film, they also introduced us to Benjamin and kind of opened the gates to us being able to hear his experiences. So that's really the main approach that we took to shooting the glacier. And yes, we wanted to have this almost disorientating approach to those close-in shots, and then later on reveal the slightly the wider perspective. So Tom, before I move on to talking about the different contributors that we featured, Tom or Andy, was there anything you wanted to add to that element of our shooting experience?
I don't think so from my perspective, Kate. I mean, Tom's covered how I got involved in the thing, and it's been a real pleasure working with you both, but you know that already. In terms of it was very interesting project for me, and we'll perhaps come on to this later, but it made me look at the environment from a slightly different perspective, and thinking about shooting angles and where we could go, and then just seeing, focusing in, if you like, on how the changes of how the glaciers evolved over the last 20 years of work in, and it was more in detail than realizing, oh, it's actually more significant than I thought when I start to think back like that. Because you tend to live in the present, or I do, you live in the present, you don't think about it, and then you think, oh yeah, 10 years ago it was like this, and 15 years ago it was like that. And so it was not exactly eye-opening, but a broadening of perspective for me. And so it was a great experience to do that.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And we'll come back and talk with you a bit more in a bit about collaborating on the film together. I just wanted to talk, before we sort of open it out to a wider conversation, then just a bit of an introduction to the people that we featured in the film. Andy, as Tom already said right from the top, was very core right from the very beginning, the early seeds of this project and this idea, and was very much at the center of it. And as our ideas, as Tom's already kind of explained to you, broadened, and we realized we wanted to include other voices in it, we worked hard to connect and find people who were going to offer maybe some different perspectives to the project. And so I've already mentioned Benjamin Claret, the ice cave manager, and that generational experience that he has passed from grandfather to father, and to him now to his son. There was Laure, the artist and the herbalist, and her daughter Luna, who, as you see, have a very alternative perspective as well. And actually, we met her through Timothée. So Timothée Motin, the guy who runs the community garden in Chamonix, I actually found him because I was trying to find someone who was born in Chamonix and had a very bit like Benjamin, this sort of multiple generational connection with the region, with the mountain, with the glacier. And I actually found him through an article. He used to be the hut guardian for the hut at the foot of the Bossons Glacier. And there were some local newspaper articles about him as he had found the remains of an aircraft, a very old aircraft, that was a cargo aircraft that had crashed on the glacier many years ago. And as the glacier had receded, remains of this aircraft were found in the moraine left behind the glacier. And there were a few local articles, and that's how I found him. And as Tom and I got to know him and started talking to him, we then learned all of this fascinating information about his experience living in the area and his experience with the glacier and the mountain. And then it was through him that we met Laurent, as they were close childhood friends. And it was also through him that we met Laure, as she happened to wander past one day when we were chatting and started talking to us. And so it was a really fascinating experience of this kind of chain reaction of meeting people and them introducing us to other people. And Andy also was very instrumental in that, as I think, Andy, we'd been having a coffee with you and Luc Moreau, the glaciologist, who was also someone that we'd been recommended to talk to by many other people. He happened to come in and get coffee at the same time. So there was this sort of wonderful experience of meeting people through people. And there were other people, actually, that we interviewed and talked to for this film, that due to the boundaries that we had set ourselves on making the film and the length that the film was going to be, we just did not have enough time to include all of these different characters in it. And we very much wanted to make sure that we didn't just feature multiple people saying the same thing. For example, we wanted to feature people whose stories that we were listening to sat together in a way that we felt worked. But we also spoke to some other fascinating people. Andy actually introduced us to the hut guardian at the Refuge de Plan d'Arguil, Claude, who is a very fascinating and charming gentleman, and Amélie as well, who is the guardian at the Refuge de Requin. And we spoke to them a lot about some of the challenges that the mountain huts have with accessing water, and how the long-term problems that they envisage as the glaciers recede, their access to water. We also spoke to farmers who farmed in the region in the Chamonix Valley. Jerome and Claire, a husband and wife, who farm cattle, and they also grow various vegetables in the Chamonix Valley, and the challenges that they're facing, a lot of which were to do with water access as well, all wrapped up with the glaciers receding, the problem with water access. So there's a second film with all of those people that could potentially be made as well. So that just gives you
Concept Pro.
And Concept Pro, of course, the fantastic Nico from Concept Pro, who is absolutely an incredible person to speak to and very generous with his time. And yeah, it was brilliant to meet him and film with him. So so you can sort of start to see why the process of making this film took us the best part of 2 years. So that just gives you a bit of an overview about our approach to how we made it and some of the challenges we faced and the experience of shooting in that area and the people that we featured in the film. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add before we open it up to some questions and answers.
No, it'd be great if anyone wants to field any questions.
Great. Thank you all for that. That was really interesting, both to see and to hear some of the background and the footage. While we give people a minute to think about questions, please raise a hand or type them into the chat. Andy, I want to know that incredibly fast receding of the glaciers. What's happening to things like the Aiguille de Midi on which the ski station is perched? Are all those rock piles slowly getting more unstable as things start to melt?
That's a very easy question. Yes. The Compagnie de Mont Blanc has metering systems cemented into the rocks of the Aiguille du Midi, and they measure the movement of the rocks within the Aiguille du Midi. And there is definitely a limited lifespan on that facility because it's in an active glacial environment where the permafrost cements all the rock together. And what's more, there happens to be a major fault line that runs pretty much directly through the Aiguille du Midi. Some of the people in the room at the moment will have heard of large rock falls occurring on the Arête de Cosmica. Classic introductory alpine climb. There have been big rock falls on there, and it's because of that fault line. And yeah, I would say, in geological time, it's got a very, very limited lifespan. Will that outlive the glacier itself? That's not for me to say, but I've spoken with both Luc Moreau and an expert called Luc Ravenel, who works at the University of Haute-Savoie, who's one of his particular things is measuring rockfall as the area goes from being glacial to being post-glacial. So the Aiguille du Midi has got a sell-by date. When it is, not my area of expertise, but for sure it does have one, yes.
And does the Chamonix Valley have a kind of, are people planning a post-ski future yet for the valley, or are they just trying to extend the life of the ski resorts as long as they can?
Right. Well, there's two post-bits unused in the quote in the film that Tom and Kate chose to put in about me laughing nervously because it's the big question: what does the future hold for salmon? And it's a tough call. It's the $64 million question, probably more than $64 million. You could look at it, and you could look at it from the commercial aspect. The Compagnie de Mont Blanc, their business is running ski lifts. Right. So their interest is in running those ski lifts for as long as they possibly can. And whilst there is summer stuff going on, and there's mountain biking and there's rambling and all of that, their interest is in prolonging the ski part, which is the most profitable part of the business, for as long as they possibly can. By contrast, the local government has a different priority, and whilst commerce is, I would imagine, will be built into a lot of their thinking. It's not only that. And Eric Fournier, who's the mayor of Chamonix, is a very kind and considerate gentleman. I met him personally on a couple of occasions, and he's been in the post for as long as I can remember. So he's very much his interest. He's not a career politician. He's a mayor. He looks after Chamonix, and I would love it if Kate and Tom could interview him.
We tried. We reached out to him, but yeah.
So is there a plan? You'd have to ask Eric Fournier. If you look over the border in Switzerland, you can see that the whole country, whose not existence, but the industry in Switzerland, it's got light industry and tourism and the whole Matterhorn thing and all that stuff. They know it's going to change, and they're actively, they're building flood defenses, and they're changing the way they market the place. They're very good at planning, the Swiss. I'm going to be he says grossly generalizing, but they're going to be looking further ahead than the French, governmentally speaking, I would guess. But there has to be a discussion now whether what that comes up with. Meanwhile, you've got people like myself who are diversifying, and realistically, I'm in the twilight of my guiding career, and I've got a few more years, and then I can go and rush my hands and go and live wherever I live, and because I won't have the physical capacity to work in a glacial environment, but if I was an up and coming mountain guy, let's say I'd qualified in my 30s, and I think I've only got another 30 years of doing this, I know that I'm going to have to diversify my my portfolio as a mountain guide, and guiding, soft skills of guiding are transferable to all sorts of different things, whether it's mountain biking or walking or paragliding or whatever, something that doesn't rely on snow. So there's an answer to your question at governmental level, economic level, and individual level, which was referred to in the film.
One little story that didn't make it into the film that came from speaking to some of the agricultural community in the valley was they had a strong sense that the price of land has been, and Andy, it would be interesting to know if you agree with this, that the price of land has been affected, by post-COVID, more people being able to move to the mountains and work remotely, but also by the sense that a resort like Chamonix that has the infrastructure to access higher terrain than lower resorts is going to become more attractive in the coming years because you'll be able to ski there when you can't ski elsewhere. So there's a sort of a squeeze effect happening on people who want to do something like farming in the valley because it just becomes really hard for them to hang on to the land or to hang on to their property.
Mm-hmm. So that's so from that perspective, then, yes, if we look at the timeline of the ski industry and supply and demand, then it's going to become more and more expensive to ski in fewer and fewer places. So the demand is the demand is going to stay more or less the same up to a point, and the supply is just contracting. So the higher level resorts are going to get more and more expensive, and then all of a sudden you won't be able to ski there, and then the price of the land will go and will plummet like a stone. So in terms of the grandchildren of those farmers who exist now, hang in there, guys. Don't sell. Do not sell, because then, well, unless you want to make a shitload of money and go and live elsewhere, and it's super interesting, isn't it, that the only person who said they would leave Chamonix is Benjamin Clavier, because he sees himself as a one-trick pony. Not true. He could do loads of other stuff. He's clearly a very capable guy, but that's his thing, and he wants to retain the vision of Chamonix as it was, this thing that his family did for ages and ages, whereas the rest of us, perhaps me less so than the younger element, but even so, if I had another 10 years, if it was impossible to go and ski on glaciers next year, I'd still be here. If I was working, I'd still be doing stuff, because Chamonix is amazing. And I often say to people, you can do all sorts of things in Chamonix. You can mountain bike, you can rock climb, you can go shopping now. There's so many designer outlets here, blimey, so there's all these things that you can do in Chamonix, and again, it's a matter of being diverse, and it will be interesting to know what the farmers, how they could see themselves diversifying or changing. If they wanted to stay and live in Chamonix and farm there, they could. But if it was a case of show me the money, well then sell now, guys. But if you want your kids to be living here in 2 generations' time, don't sell.
We've got some questions coming in through the chat. So from Oliver, what concerns are there around water availability with the loss of glaciers and the snow?
Yeah, that is a big concern, I think, for lots of different elements that we've touched on, I think. So for the farmers, particularly, water source and water availability is something that they're looking down the line, is something that they're very concerned about, the agricultural community that we spoke to, and as also the hut guardians that we spoke to. Water availability is also a long-term worry for them. Some of them already, as we saw with the Refuge de Plan de Gris, have got some ingenious ways of storing their water, big sort of bladder-like containers that they are piping water in to store it. Other hire huts are coming up with other solutions that, Andy, I think you've probably seen firsthand. But yeah, that is a big concern long term, I think, as the glaciers recede.
Question from Dominique. What altitude was the permaculture project that was featured in the film?
Well, that's quite close to the town centre. So that's at valley level. Andy, which is
1,000 meters, more or less.
yeah, 1,000 meters. So
But I would say I would add to that, and when you look at the line that Law came out with about vegetation coming up, that the level at which culture is going to change, or which culture is possible is going to change, and it's going to rise. And when you think about, I mean, the word Alp means the high pastures that they graze the cows in. So the grassland that currently exists at, say, 1,900 meters, that's going to rise. And things are getting more fertile. And if you think of the Lake District now. Now imagine Chamonix like that. We don't need a looking glass, a crystal ball. Just look at what it's like in the UK. That's a post-glacial environment, and that is what Chamonix will be like. And people in the Lake District have a marvelous time. So, and it's just a matter of getting, from my perspective as a mountain professional, that's the way I look at it. Oh, there are beautiful post-glacial environments too. It doesn't have to be that way.
Question from Richard, who is the president of the Eagles. We're a big club with different views on what we might be able to do as a club and as individuals. Have you got any ideas on what we can do as a club to help?
Thanks, Richard. I see that there is an emphasis on trying to travel as sustainably as possible in the club forums. So I'm all behind that, although of course we all know that it's expensive. I'm going to put just here in the chat the link to Butcher Booch. I guess the only thing that I would say would be that as tourists, it could be useful for us to try to think about the places that we visit from the perspective of the people who are based there or who have roots there, and to see if there's any way that we can contribute, and also people who work in tourism and welcome tourists, but it's interesting to think about how can we contribute to the types of local action that's happening in response to local factors when we go and visit these places. So have a look at the Booch website.
Question from Stephen Rachel, pointing out that many of us have seen or personally experienced the depressing date markers on the climb off the glacier up to the train station. And the question, many of your viewers may not have seen that evidence. Was there a reason you decided not to directly illustrate the scale of the changes of the glacier in this film?
Oh, it's a good question. We showed the scale of the changes in a different way, I think, in that you could see, as you looked down, you could see those scorch marks down the side of the valley where the glacier has receded. But you're right, those are a very emotive reminder, aren't they, of how the glacier has receded over time. Why didn't we include those? There's only so many shots you can include in a film, I suppose.
I think, yeah, and I think that it's a really interesting question, because obviously we went and researched films that have been made about Chamonix, and most of them do include those visuals or the before and after type visuals. And so we felt as if people have seen them. And that's why it's such a great question, because it reminds us that, when you go deep into researching something, you're not necessarily viewing it with the same eyes as someone who's doesn't have a particular interest in that subject. So that's really useful to hear, that maybe people aren't as familiar with the imagery as we might think they are.
Yeah.
I would say that, yes, it is very graphic, and it's one of the most, what's the word, impressive things that you see when you go down those stairs and you see, the dates that when I first visited Chamonix, like 1980, and it's there, and you look, and it's the effect of looking down. So, you could show those signs, but it wouldn't mean anything unless you were actually in context and looking down. If you walk those steps yourself, then you would know. Very, very difficult and to illustrate the scale. And you've got Luke Moreau there saying, "Oh, we've lost 300 meters of thickness and 300 kilometers of length." It's tricky, even if you shot all those things to put it together, short of doing very expensive, CGI modeling and having a shrinking glacier going. Even then, you've got to. It's when you stand there personally and look down and you realize, well, I'm 2 meters tall, and I was there when there was ice here, and now it's not. And that's a very difficult thing to show. And in a way, I'd sort of say, well, let's all accept the scale here and try and look forward. And that's the trick, to be able to look forward. And that's what the particularly Timothée and Laure are very good at. And we're kind of looking forward, trying to feeling away in the dark almost, because nobody really knows what's going to happen. We're going to got a rough idea, but timeline and how much and when, tricky. Yeah.
Also, we feel as if there's still a beauty to what you see when you go, what you see right now. It's different, but there's a beauty to it that we wanted to explore and try to capture visually. Maybe there's something to be said for seeing, this is something that Laure spoke about as well, sort of finding, what happens when you try to find a beauty in a transformation that's happening, even if there's a kind of a violence and associated with it. Perhaps you can develop a different relationship with the environment by looking at it in that way.
And just on a practical level, Dave, that answers your question. The ladders are still there. They're getting longer and longer. Andy, that's right, correct? They continue to extend the ladders year by year.
Yeah, well, and a new cable car system, which was partly a subject. It was hinted at in the pre-edits. There was a discussion over the new cable car. I know that because I saw the pre-edits, but now we've eliminated that, and that's fine. But yeah, this new cable car that goes down much lower. And how long will that be economically effective? Well, somebody's done their sums at the Compagnie de Mont Blanc, clearly, but that's it's a rapidly changing dynamic environment. Yeah.
I'm actually Geraldine Walkington. For some reason, when I put Zoom on, my daughter's name appeared. So I don't know how she managed to get on there, but I'm Geraldine and I'm an artist, and I've been drawing and sketching. It started off through mountaineering and going on sort of exploring the glaciers. My artwork, taking sketchbooks with me, drawing all the chaos, as people have been talking about, and how I can actually make the chaos into something that is readable on a canvas or on a print. So all my work has been based around the different glaciers in the Chamonix Valley, but in particular recently it's been about the source of the Arveyron, which is the place there that Turner and Ruskin and Francistown, different artists were there at the 1800s, and it's disappeared. And it's just the same as the glaciers disappearing. All the artwork that's been in the museums and lauded as absolutely fantastic, it's just not there anymore, the actual place itself. So looking at the source of the Arveyron now, as you go through and you see the cleft and all the great big boulders that I've tried very hard to climb over and under and round to get to the crux of the actual the cleft, so that I can actually draw it properly. It's really difficult, but I've dangled off a rope on the top from somewhere or another, but it's the whole trying to create and show something that that people from sort of all those years ago would never have dreamt of seeing. And that's the same. It makes me feel like it's the same with the glacier now. And what Flora was saying, is it Flora? Was saying about the fact that as the glaciers are going, the snow level is going up, so too is the plant life. And that to me was just absolutely a light bulb moment in the way that I would approach different aspects of my artwork to include both flora and fauna and the glaciers as well. So that's something I'm working on. But it's the whether you can promote the artwork of people. There's lots of people who do art in the valley of Chamonix, and it's difficult to get to all these different people to talk about different things. And everybody has different specialisms, as Andy Perkins, who does the sculptures, Darren, who's on, I think she's on here somewhere. But it would be really interesting to actually get together a whole pile of artists to create the work that to present to people, to show as a alongside the audio and the visual and the filming, so that it's not just it's more than the filming, which to me it was wonderful. It was a fantastic thing to see it. I saw it in Kendal Film Festival, the actual film itself. But I think that there's a role artists can play, and it'd be really interesting to hear what you would think about that. Sorry, I've gone on.
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, I think that's really interesting that you say that, Geraldine, because, you know, as I said earlier, that working with these two gave me a different perspective. And so you're absolutely right. And whilst I'm an engineer by background, I think art has got an enormously important role to play in the way that we make decisions in our lives. And in terms of forming a network, I mean, the great thing about Chamonix is that it's international, with people from all over the world doing all sorts of different things. And there's an energy there, which a very strong energy to do stuff. And it's only a matter, only says, it is a matter of putting people together, which this film does partially. And by the way, I haven't met any of the other protagonists, but I really, really want to at some stage. We'll have to. So I think that well, the Butch, for example, it's a good communication. That will be an instant response, and I'm sure that Kate and Tom are nodding there. That will be a good place to start. And I'm familiar with Andy Perkins, because I used to get phone calls for him all the time, because and you know, with the number of times that the two of us have been confused. So there's Perkins, and there's all sorts of people doing amazing. And you know, even one of the people like Mario Colonel and on all those guys. So there's a lot of energy here, and I would say the starting point will be the Butch and take it and see where that goes. Right. You guys got Kate and Tom. What are your artists?
I absolutely agree with Andy and Lure, who we spoke to, and she's also involved in a lot of the Butch activity. She does a lot of outreach work in local hospitals and schools and organizations to try and spread the net and bring people in to join in, which sounds very much along the sort of the ethos of what you're talking about. And also, just to say, when we started this project, we had a conversation with someone about the topics that we touch on in this film, and it really, a strong message that came out of it was that with these subjects that we're talking about, you can't just keep approaching it from the same angle with the same conversation over and over again. You've got to find lots of different creative ways of bringing as many people as possible into it, and art and creative outlets is 100% part of that. And so yeah, I'm excited to see where this idea goes.
I mean,
Geraldine,
I'm
just dropping our email address into the chat. I'd love to see your work and love to continue this conversation after this as well.
Yeah,
so let's keep in touch. Yeah.
I'm just going to add in there on the art form. You didn't mention music, Geraldine, and
music is huge.
As a byproduct of that, one of the original plans, I'm sure Tom won't mind me saying this, is that one of the original plans was to get a load of different protagonists, including me, doing percussive stuff. I mean, and that's the original project. We went up to the tunnels in the Mer de Glace, and I referred to it in the film about doing our sound work. And I was sat, and we said, "Oh, let's just get some sound effects." And I kind of tapped my ice axe in the tunnels, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And it was October, so there was nobody there. Tapped my ice axe, and then started tapping. And Tommy was obviously thinking about the music. What's the music going to be? He said, "Oh, would you just tap out a rhythm?" And we ended up, if you listen to the SoundCloud link that Tom posted in the chat, it was originally going to be a music project, and then we're going to have that. Remind me the name of the guy, Tom, who was going to there was a guy who was a percussionist, wasn't he, that was going to do something. We were all going to get together and drum the glacier, basically.
What was
Yeah, and this could still happen. What's his name, Kate? The ice musician.
He was really up for it as well. He's based in, is it Norway he's based in? And he tours the world playing with an orchestra where all the instruments are made out of ice. But what I learned from getting to know him is you can't just be any old ice. It's got to be very specific density and quality of ice for it to have the right resonance. But 100%, this idea is still could happen because I'm very into this.
Mm.
Could I just sort of say something about audio? And because I wanted to do something with the sound of the river, the actual cascade that comes down from the chasm, and then I just thought about the vibrations of the rocks, and we can actually sort of take recordings of the vibrations, which I just thought was a really interesting sort of furtherance of including all things that go on, so that people who don't know what's going on has some further knowledge and more of an understanding. Because you're standing there, all of you, exactly the same. You're standing there at the edge of a glacier. You're looking into the chasms, and you're seeing all the different colours. You're seeing all the danger as well. You know, it's that's the sort of thing that I really, really want to project. So,
Tom, could you share in the comments? Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Could you share in the comments, Tom, the link that we put at the end of the credits? Because to the scientist, the climate scientist that we connected with, he works all over. I think he's somewhere in the north of Norway right now, but he does just that. He does sound recordings from deep in the glaciers, and he's creating a database, a sort of accessible database of all these really incredible, quite very subtle sometimes sound recordings. And yeah, it's worth sharing.
Yeah, his name's Ugo Nani.
It sounds like there's a great discussion for the artists to have, but possibly better done in person in Chamonix, face to face. I'm conscious that Leonard has had his hand up for a very long time. So, Geraldine, thank you very much for your contribution, and I'm sure that's a discussion to be furthered in the future.
Greetings from Glasgow. That is a great film. Yeah, super interesting. I like the soundtrack. Also, just I'm so glad the tech worked, because it was broadcast on Zoom, and streaming onto another platform can lead to all sorts of glitches and the sound not working. So it came through nice and clear, which was brilliant. Did it justice. So whenever there's something which is really arresting and alarming, and you hear these stories, then it sort of leads to engagement with climate change and the impacts of that. And people say the antidote to climate anxiety is climate action. And there's a bit of a flavour of that. I was struck by sort of what the comment from one of the responders that was about defence and sort of getting organised. And I wondered, as filmmakers, how you sort of balance the kind of activism or triggering activism, because there's a bit of an undercurrent of that. But it's not a really big campaigny sort of, it's not a big campaign pitch film. So I wonder how that's sort of balanced, and when you've screened it, where you found that it sort of does, as we've touched on a bit this evening, sort of lead to considerations around individual and collective footprints and what climate action might follow.
Okay. Yeah, I think that we really wanted to make sure we were talking to people who were responding in positive ways, and especially the idea of transforming anxiety into positive action. But then in the edit, really we had to be led by the material that we had, and to try to represent people as accurately and fairly as we could. I think the voice that comes out as being more despondent is Benjamin's voice. He's also, I think, the youngest character, and it would be interesting to keep in touch with him and see possibly how his perspective changes over time. We were really keen to include the moment where Tim reflects upon the film itself, and the idea of that taking part in the film is essential, is an action of sorts for the people who did. But maybe I'd put the question back to you and ask, which of those voices personally for you was the heaviest, or stood out the most, and which of them defined the tone of the film for you?
I mean, I really liked how it was listing. It's an exposition of different people's kind of engagement with the landscape. So, I mean, I think all of the voices spoke really clearly. But yeah, I suppose it's the tunnel at the foot of the glacier that's so obviously so very time limited.
It's been really interesting because so many people who have watched it, so many people have had different things have really leapt out in different ways for different people. And some people have come away thinking, oh God, that was really quite depressing. And other people have come away thinking, gosh, I actually come away feeling quite hopeful. And so it's very, yeah, people have had very different experiences from the perspective of viewing the film.
I think one of the things I liked about it was particularly the woman is just being forward looking, because with all the climate action in the world, this is not a train we can turn around in 6 months. Even if every single one of us did absolutely everything we can think of, it'll take decades, centuries possibly to turn this round. So adapting to change and finding the positive in a changing world and new circumstances is all we can do. It is the rest of our lifetimes, no matter how active we are as in a climate fight. And I like the fact that the film wasn't just, oh God, how much has been lost, but also a voice that says it's change, and we need to ride that change and look for what positive comes out of it.
Yeah. I think, from a personal point of view, it's definitely changed my mental state. And you referred to climate anxiety there, Leonard, and that definitely affects me, and I can tell you definitely me and a lot of other people in this valley. And we can't stop that change, as Kathy quite rightly just said. So then it's a matter of going, well, how can I first of all accept and then work with that change? And it's a mental, and yes, changing our attitudes as ski tourists, as a lot of people in the audience will be, and changing what we do and how we do it is going to slow that change. But in the end, where we need to change between our left ears and our right ears, and in terms of what we do, and we love the environment and we love the activity, and that's why we do the thing that we do. And if we can continue to be that, continue to do some activity in a beautiful environment, then we'll still be happy. And let's just leave aside the rest of the world for the moment, because as mountain hedonists, we're terrible people, we're really selfish, and we do what we do, and we don't really care what the world, perhaps I'm being a bit over egging the pudding slightly, but we do what we do. It's an incredibly selfish activity. Chamonix, people call it the world capital of alpinism. It's the world capital of mountain hedonism, not alpinism. People just come in here and have fun. And Timothy rightly said, we're very lucky, and how can we continue to be lucky whilst minimizing the pain and Tom used the word violence, and it's not it's not too strong a word. Change is throughout the world, but even in the mountain heaven of hedonism capital of the world, there's going to be some violent change, and we have to adapt mentally to that.
Great. Well, I think that's a fairly sobering point in which to wrap up the evening.
It's not meant to be sobering, Kathy. It's meant to be positive. I think that people can change, and that's the message of this film, that people can. So I don't really know. I don't want to end it on a sobering thing. No, it's all depressing. It's a positive thing. Change is an opportunity, not something to be scared of. That's you told.
Indeed, that's all we can do is adapt and try and adapt in ways that are creative and interesting. And that's part of why I'm so delighted that we got you guys here this evening to talk about this, because this is a creative, interesting, informative response. And thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.